Jesus is presented at the temple. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Mary and Joseph brought him to the temple. The temple was like a big church. It was in the city of Jerusalem. Mary and Joseph had to walk a long way to get from Bethlehem to Jerusalem. Mary and Joseph went to the temple to say a special thank you to God for their baby. They wanted to promise God to do their best to teach Jesus how to be good and kind to others. We want Jesus to know about God's promise, they said. We want Jesus to know that God promised to love everyone. When Mary and Joseph got to the temple, a very old man came up to them. His name was Simeon. God had told Simeon that he wouldn't die until he had seen the Messiah. The Messiah was the one who would show everyone what God is like. When Simeon saw the baby Jesus, he knew this baby was God's Messiah. Simeon was so happy. He took the tiny baby Jesus into his arms and sang a song. Dear God, now I can die feeling happy. It was just as you promised. With my own eyes, I've seen the love you want to give to everyone in the world. Then the old man's eyes grew very sad. He looked right at Mary and told her that she would feel great pain sometime because of Jesus. It will feel like a sword going right into your heart, said Simeon. Another person in the temple was also glad to see Jesus. Her name was Anna. Anna was a prophet. A prophet tells people how to live in God's way. Anna had lived in the temple for many years. Now she was 84 years old. When Anna saw the baby Jesus, her wrinkled face turned all to smiles. And as she walked around the big temple, she told everyone about Jesus. Mary and Joseph were tired when they finally got home, but Mary lay awake for a long time thinking about Anna and Simeon. There were so many things Mary didn't understand, but she knew that God was with her all the time. When she thought of that, she wasn't afraid anymore. Please bless these words to our use. Amen.
I don't know if you folks can see this, but I have a nativity scene here with all the usual cast of characters. I'll hold them up so you can see them. Have you ever looked at a nativity scene like this one and asked yourself why you only see certain characters from the story of Jesus' early days, but not others? To be fair, some of the characters are mainstays. I mean, it would be hard to imagine a nativity scene that was missing, say, the baby Jesus, or his parents, Mary and Joseph, it'd be hard to imagine a nativity scene that didn't include shepherds or angels or even the Magi. There's 3 of them here. I just can't hold them all in my hand. These are the characters we hear about year after year. So it would make sense that we would get used to seeing them in our nativity scenes as well. They're also all featured in our annual Christmas pageants that our young people participate in every year, which is another way that we draw nearer to the story of that first Christmas so long ago. But why do these retellings not make room for the 2 characters who take center stage in the reading that we just heard Jill read us from Luke's Gospel? I don't know about you, but I've never seen a pair of crush figurines made to depict either Simeon or Anna in any of the nativity scenes I've encountered over the years. Has anyone ever seen them? Was anyone here ever asked to play the part of Anna or Simeon in a church Christmas pageant? When I think back to my earlier days as a student in Sunday school, I remember playing Mary one year. I played a shepherd another year. And I played an angel in yet another year. I even remember playing one of the Magi one year. I think I was the one giving the frankincense, if I remember correctly. But I was never asked to play Anna, and I was never asked to play Simeon. Neither were any of my classmates, for that matter. All of this raises for me a curious question, one that has been bothering me for years, ever since I first came across the story of these two characters. When it comes to the depictions surrounding Jesus' birth, whether they be live action or miniaturized still lifes like this one, why did the story of Anna and Simeon's encounter with Jesus not make the cut? In an effort to make sense of this question, I've been turning it over and over in my head to try to come up with a reason why these characters are so often left out of our telling of the Christmas story that we know and love so well. And here's what I've come up with. Maybe the story of Simeon and Anna and how they met Jesus isn't included in the traditional retelling of the Christmas story because it is so different from those other, more familiar parts of Jesus' story. Now, what do I mean by different? Well, for starters, consider this. Unlike all the other nativity characters, Anna and Simeon do not have to undertake any kind of a journey in order to come face to face with Jesus. Unlike Mary and Joseph, who have to pick up and travel to Bethlehem from their hometown during Mary's third trimester of pregnancy, or the shepherds, who have to trek back into town from the fields where they were watching their sheep that evening, or the Magi, who had to travel from some far-off place in the east, or even the angels, who had to come down from heaven in order to share their message of goodwill with the shepherds, Simeon and Anna are not required to relocate themselves in any way in order to meet the Christ child. Instead, we are told that the two of them had set up camp in the Temple of Jerusalem and had committed themselves to not leaving that place until they saw God's promise fulfilled during their lifetime. Instead of having to embark upon an epic journey in order to come into contact with Jesus, Anna and Simeon simply had to wait around for Jesus to come to them. Perhaps it is this aspect of the story that leads us to leave it on the cutting room floor when we tell and retell Jesus' story every year. I mean, in the midst of all these other long Advent journeys, where all roads eventually lead to Bethlehem, how can we be expected to get excited about this story of two people who just have to sit around and wait for Jesus to show up in their living room one day? No matter how touching it is when these two actually come face to face with Jesus, the story lacks the sense of adventure of the other stories, where people are actually required to pick up and move in order to meet the Christ child. There's another reason why this story of Simeon and Anna's encounter with Jesus may have failed to capture our imaginations enough to earn a permanent place in our yearly celebrations. Not only does Jesus come to this story's characters, instead of it being the other way around, he comes to them for the most ordinary of reasons. When Jesus arrives at the temple with his parents on that fateful day, 8 days after his birth in Bethlehem, he is there for the same reason that any other week-old baby would be in that place: to be blessed with a name and be dedicated to God. There was no fanfare surrounding the baby Jesus and his family when they arrived at the temple. Nothing whatsoever to indicate that these people had anything special or significant about them. There were no choirs of angels, no roving bands of shepherds showing up to bear witness to their arrival, no celestial GPS beacons shining a light down upon them, no magi waiting to shower the baby with gifts. On that day, Mary and Joseph did not come to the temple to show off their one-of-a-kind, only begotten Son of God to the people of God. Nope. On that day, they were just like every other family who had just welcomed a new baby. And they were there to do the same things that the families like theirs were required to do according to their religious and cultural traditions. They were there on an ordinary day, with an ordinary agenda, one that was far and away from the amazing events that had surrounded them in recent days. In fact, if Simeon and Anna had not recognized Jesus for who he really was and made such a fuss over him, Jesus and his parents probably would have done their duty, checked this little ritual off their to-do list, and turned around to go home again, without drawing any attention to themselves. If we look at the encounter in question, and we see it reflected in this light, it makes even more sense that such a seemingly insignificant event in the life of Jesus would not have earned a place in our yearly recounting of the Christmas story. After all, how can there be room for the story of an encounter that is so devoid of magic and mystery, in a story that is chock full of these of those essential ingredients? Maybe, at the end of the day, the story of how Anna and Simeon met Jesus is just too small, too commonplace, too ordinary to merit a place within our yearly traditions. And yet, it is for these very reasons that I just outlined that the story of Simeon and Anna's encounter with the child we call Jesus deserves to be more than a mere historical footnote in the story of our faith. Because the Christmas story, as we see it portrayed in our traditional nativity scenes and in our annual Christmas pageants, has always been about the extraordinary events that surrounded the way in which Jesus came into the world. We are so enamored by the details of this story that we devote close to 6 weeks of every year to its retelling. The 4 weeks of Advent, and then the weeks that encompass Christmas and Epiphany. We surround ourselves with the larger-than-life details of this story, reveling in them and celebrating them during this time of year. And then what do? We pack it all up and put it away until the holiday season rolls around next year. But since we have a calendar year that is made up of 52 weeks, does it make sense to respond to Jesus and his story in this way? This is why we need to hear about characters like Simeon and Anna, because their encounter with Jesus reminds us of the story that still goes on long after the holidays are over. The story that lets us know that Jesus comes to us where we are, in the most ordinary of ways, on the most ordinary of days. The story that was never meant to be an end in itself, but the beginning of something that still changes lives and the world to this day. That doesn't mean that I don't still wish to see Simeon and Anna portrayed in a nativity scene such as this. But maybe if that day ever comes, we could bring those two characters out only after the others have been put away. Then they could serve as a reminder of how the Jesus we celebrate at Christmas is someone that we can celebrate and encounter every day of the year, even the ordinary ones. Amen. Our next hymn is number 87 in Voices United, I Am the Light of the World.